Great.
Okay, so let's get started. Okay, well, hello, ACS, SF Bay community, and all of you that aren't necessarily in the San Francisco Bay Area. Thanks for being here. And welcome to our May 2022 ACS SF Bay monthly speaker event. And we meet the fourth Tuesday of the month, most months. I'm Susan Hopp, a board member, and I'm here with fellow board member Bob Wilson. And for anyone new to the American Cetacean Society, ACS began in 1967 and is the oldest nonprofit dedicated to the protection of whales, dolphins, porpoises, and their habitat. And we do this through education, community engagement, and grants toward marine research. We really appreciate your donations in support of our mission. They fund our grants and support our expenses around these monthly talks. So to all of you who donate, a big thank you. We are recording this session and we encourage you to put questions in the Q&A. And after the presentation, we'll do our best to get to them. So all of us here tonight share a love and deep respect for our oceans and the marine mammal inhabitants that call the ocean home. Tonight, we are going deep, or I might say up close and personal, into the story of one particular cetacean, an orca known as Lolita or Tokitae. The story begins in 1970 and has so much to say about the intelligence of this individual and her species, and so much to say about what humans can learn, how we can and should change in our relationship to the animals with whom we share our planet. It's an honor to have Howard Garrett as our speaker tonight to tell Toki's story. And let me introduce Howard. After obtaining a degree in sociology from the Colorado College, Howard began as a field research with the Center for Whale Research on San Juan Island in 1981. In 1995, he began campaigning to return Lolita Tokitae, a southern resident orca captured in 1970, to her home waters in the Salish Sea. In 2001, he and his wife, Susan Berta, founded Orca Network, a nonprofit organization based on Whidbey Island, dedicated to connecting people with whales in the Pacific Northwest and educating the importance of providing them healthy and safe habitats. Orca Network projects include Whale Sighting Network, educational programs, events, and advocacy, the Langley Whale Center, Marine Mammal Stranding Network, and the campaign to retire Toki and bring her home to the Salish Sea. Howard's interests are in the social systems and natural history of orcas and the emerging picture of diverse orca populations worldwide, with a focus on the southern resident orcas of the Salish Sea and coastal waters. With their food base now dwindling below survival levels, Orca Network advocates for salmon habitat restoration. So Howard, thank you so much for being here, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Susan. That was great. Appreciate it. And thank you, ACS San Francisco, and everybody who is tuning in for letting me talk about Toki at this crucial time in her life, because this really is a pivotal moment in her future. It's amazing. It's been going on this long, and that there is still a real possibility that she can come back. But that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, is helping to make that happen. So greetings from Whidbey Island, 30 miles north of Seattle, where we are grateful to live on land and water that are and have been for thousands of years home to many coastal Salish tribes living in spiritual harmony with the natural world. I'll just go ahead and start the slides right now, if that's okay. If
Perfect.
I can share screen and get it going.
Last off, okay.
Yeah, okay, so our question of the day is, Who is this whale? And what can be done to help her? My experiences with population level studies like demographic surveys, but for the past 25 years, I've been wondering about this single orca. And now it's more relevant than ever because how she is perceived will likely determine what happens to her. Because if most people believe she is capable of swimming into a stretcher and being carried back to her native habitat and doing well, she'll probably get the chance to do that. But if most people think she's too old or too weak to do that safely, she probably won't be given the opportunity to try. Her life literally depends on how she's seen. And she's seen in many different ways by different people. People at marine parks call her Toki, short for Tokitae, name given to her by Dr. Jesse White, seen here in the 1970s in the tank with Toki and Hugo, a young male captured 18 months before Toki was. Hugo bashed his head against the walls in the viewing window of his tank, at one point nearly slicing off the tip of his rostrum, which Dr. White stitched back on. He was inspecting the wound in this photo. Hugo died of a brain aneurysm in 1980. Dr. White was sent to Seattle in 1970 to choose one of the orcas captured in Penn Cove. He must have been impressed by her. He said she was so courageous and yet so gentle. His feelings for Toki seems to have set the tone for her care at the Seaquarium for many years, but for the staff there and for most of the public, she is generally seen as a willing performer, but a habituated whale, captured as a baby and wouldn't remember where she came from and only knows what trainers have taught her. Many believe she's damaged from being isolated for so long and that she can't handle changes. They often see her as old and frail, even geriatric, possibly ill or carrying pathogens that could infect endangered southern residents. Of course, that can never be allowed to happen. Any possibility of her spreading a disease can and will be resolved before she leaves Miami. For those of us who are unhappy seeing her kept in that tank year after year and would like to see her return to her native habitat, she's often seen as a symbol of captivity and human arrogance to dominate and hold large, powerful, wide-ranging animals captive for profit or entertainment. And they may see her as a highly intelligent, sentient being, brave and resilient, but condemned to a lifetime sentence just for being beautiful and magnificent. For the Lummi people and for Salish tribes, she's known as Skalichaktanat, a family member stolen from them and denied the respect and honor and the life she deserves. For the Lummi, Orca are Potomacan, meaning the people that live under the water. Lummies have declared their sacred obligation to bring her home. As a California kid who grew up in Carmichael, just north of Sacramento, and studied at Berkeley and Colorado College, I tend to look at her through the eyes of Western science and try to use observation and verification to see what and who she is. But over the years, I've gained huge respect for her amazing resilience and stamina and grace under extreme pressure, and for her affectionate nature as she was raised by her family. Of course, we don't know how she is seen or named by her own real orca family. Toki has been given 3 different names by humans. Dr. White called her Tokitae, Coastal Salish greeting meaning nice day, pretty colors. But the Seaquarium renamed her Lolita, saying she would be the young female mate for Hugo, who is also a southern resident. And Lummi Chief Bill James named her Skalichaktanat, after Skalichuk, the name of a village on Penn Cove where she last saw and heard her family. I call her Toki because it's easy to say, and it's the name that she has heard all these years. So I'll try looking at her first as a member of her species, a killer whale or Sinus orca, with all the astounding abilities we now know the species possesses. And then I'll consider her as a member of her family, her community, her clan, the southern residents. She's identified as a member of L-Pod by photos from the capture and the fact that her calls match with the L-Pod dialect. And then I'll try to see her as she is, with her own personality, her character, and her abilities, and her incredible spirit and tenacity through almost 52 years of confinement in a tank that's only 4 times her length and not as deep as she is long. A lot has happened at the Seaquarium lately. It started with 2 big developments last summer. First, in August, the Dolphin Company, owner of 22 dolphin parks, mostly in Mexico, but including 3 in the US, announced plans to purchase the Seaquarium. The previous owner was a holding company based in Sweden, so this offered the possibility of communicating with the new owners. But then in September, a USDA inspection report from June 2021 became public that showed glaring deficiencies in the care and quality controls at the aquarium. The inspection was triggered by the deaths of 5 bottlenose dolphins and 1 California sea lion at the Seaquarium in 1 year. Inspectors found enclosures in disrepair and animals, including Toki, underfed or fed rotten fish. Water quality had deteriorated. The veterinarian said her instructions were being ignored. However, that vet was soon fired after many of her allegations in the report were challenged by other staff. Virtually nothing ever leaks out of the Seaquarium, so we really have no idea how bad it really was. The whale stadium was closed to the public at some point last fall, never to reopen, as it turned out. The park now has a new veterinarian and an experienced consulting vet oversee Toki's care. Then in December 2021, another scathing report from the USDA showed 3 more dolphin deaths. One was a Pacific white-sided dolphin named Catalina, who died from trauma in the whale tank after an altercation with Toki. The dolphin company's purchase of the park couldn't be final until the problems itemized by the USDA report were addressed and the company could be granted a license to operate from the USDA. Miami-Dade County owns the property and couldn't transfer the lease to the dolphin company without USDA certification. So the USDA had to grant a license to the new owner to be able to own the park, but they couldn't continue to allow the egregious Animal Welfare Act violations in a dangerous, broken down 52-year-old unlawful tank. You can see that the gates are closed in this photo, probably to separate one of the lags, the Pacific white-sided dolphins, to avoid aggression. It's incredible that Toki has outlived the tank that was built for her in 1970. On March 4th, the USDA did grant a license to the dolphin company with a creative twist. The license simply did not include the whale stadium or Toki or the dolphin in the tank with her. USDA said they may not be displayed in any way, not even images or any public mentions, and the whale stadium must stay closed. The dolphin company agreed and became the new owner of the Seaquarium and the caretaker of an orca and a dolphin that bring in 0 revenue. Toki and the dolphin are now unseen by the public, but hopefully they are getting good care and the trainers are spending a lot of time with them. On March 23rd, Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava held a press conference to announce that Toki would be examined by independent veterinarians and the results would be made public. Also speaking at the press conference was Pritam Singh, a South Florida philanthropist and environmentalist and board member of the Sea Shepherd Society, who had announced on February 24th that he was donating $1 million toward Toki's care. He founded a new nonprofit organization called Friends of Lolita, whose board includes Dr. Roger Payne, who of course helped discover humpback songs, and dolphin scientist Diana Rice, who did the same thing for mirror self-recognition in dolphins, and Charles Vinnick, who is also executive director of the Whale Sanctuary Project. Also on the board of Friends of Lolita is Raynell Morris, whose traditional tribal name is Squilihila. She has led the Lummi efforts to bring Scully Chucktanut home. Raynell is co-founder of Sacred Lands Conservancy, a nonprofit working with the Whale Sanctuary Project to develop a sea pen for Toki in the San Juan Islands. Also speaking at the press conference were executives from the Dolphin Company, the new owner of this aquarium. The press conference showed amazing cooperation and collaboration among the diverse groups represented there. The county commission, the owner of the park, advocates for retiring her in her home waters, whale sanctuary specialists, the scientific community, and coming along at just the right time, the wealthy benefactor who can make it all happen. The Friends of Lolita is unlike any nonprofit I've ever heard of. So now, back to Toki. She is an orca, so what goes on in the brain of an orca? The brain of the killer whale may be the largest of all taxa. So move over, sperm whales. We now have the biggest brains on the planet, being in orcas. And it shows dramatic girification, which allows greater cognitive function. And don't ask me how that works, I don't know, but it's becoming popular knowledge. It's being well understood by a whole lot of people. That all those convolutions and grooves in the brain means that you can think better. And they have a lot of them. Neurons in the brain communicate across the gaps between them, called synapses, with rapid electrochemical impulses that can be measured in humans with an electroencephalogram. And for what it's worth, and again, don't ask me exactly what this means, but it sure sounds impressive, orca brains are 5 times larger than human brains. And orcas and other odontocetes have a large paralimbic cleft, lobe, that humans don't have. It's poorly understood, but some of the attributes that are ascribed to it are that it enhances thought processes, judgment, empathy, awareness, memory, emotions, and language. Those are pretty high-level abilities, and it's made to enable or enhance those capacities. So here's an interesting hypothesis. Is there the potential for reception and interpretation by the orca brain of electrical activity in other orca brains or in human brains? Maybe that's kind of off the wall, but it could be those are physical waves, and maybe they can be perceived by this paralimbic lobe. I don't know, but I'd love to know. How many of us struggle with how to interpret other people's feelings? I think it's probably all of us, all the time. Hopefully we don't have to worry much about how others are feeling, but once in a while at least, we all have to try to read the room. That's empathy, and it's very important for humans just to live and communicate with others. The paralimbic lobe seems to enable extraordinary empathy. There are enough anecdotes that illustrate enhanced empathy that it adds up to behavioral data. There are many credible reports of orcas either rescuing humans that indicate they knew we needed help, or arriving on time for events that are about them, that indicate that they knew we were thinking about them. For instance, Ken Balcom was stranded in the fog back in the mid-70s, 25 miles from Snug Harbor, where he had to go in his little boat. And that's before anything, GPS or any kind of guidance system. We knew the bearings, but there are strong currents out there and there are islands and rocks. And J-Pod came alongside the bow of his boat and guided him the entire 25 miles. And then as soon as he got beyond the fog bank into his harbor, he peeled off and went back on their way. Alexandra Morton had a very similar experience, and she describes it as being up in Johnstone Strait in the fog, while she can hear that there is a really big ship bearing down on her. And resident whales of Johnstone Strait, one of the pods, I don't recall, but did the same thing, gathered around her boat and guided her through the fog and away from the course of that ship. And Alexandra also tells about when she was in California at Marineland, that Corky was in the tank, and she was on the side of the tank talking to trainers and trying to describe to them a behavior that she had seen in the wild whales in Johnstone Strait, a kind of a peck slapping behavior. And immediately, she wasn't even talking to Corky, but Corky started doing that. And she had never done it before. It was not trained into her, but she got the suggestion somehow. It adds up. It starts to look like this is actual behavioral data, not just a bunch of anecdotes. And then in 1998, Ralph Monroe held a ceremony on San Juan Island in honor of J6, who was named Ralph in his honor. And Ralph whale had passed away, so he scheduled a ceremony for 1:30 p.m. at Limekiln Lighthouse. And at precisely 1:30 p.m., J-Pod arrived. And they didn't just pass by, they stopped and they became very activated, a lot of breaching. J8, in fact, who is J6's sister, breached 6 times in a row directly off of the rock where the ceremony was being held. And northern residents attended a memorial service for Mike Digg after he passed away in 1990. Mike had spent hundreds of hours with them as he developed the photo ID method, and they attended his service. How do they know? Some trainers have said they don't really train orcas. They just suggest a behavior and the whales know what to do. Dr. Giles says orcas are a better version of us, which suggests we could learn a thing or two from them. And Seattle Times writer Linda Mapes says when people ask her if orcas are as intelligent as humans, she tells them not to flatter themselves. It seems the word is getting out that orcas have some pretty impressive capabilities. This 2001 paper really set a new landmark for understanding orca behavior. The complex and stable vocal and behavioral cultures of sympatric groups of killer whales appear to have no parallel outside humans and represent an independent evolution of cultural faculties. So orcas, like humans, became aware of themselves at some point millions of years ago, and somewhere along the line formed into a variety of distinct culture in all the world's oceans. And of course, mirror self-recognition has been demonstrated in dolphins. So if I could interject a bit of sociology, it's important to note that self-awareness is inherently a social phenomenon. Our sense of self develops through our interactions with others. The realization that orcas have evolved into a wide variety of distinct cultures is more than just a fascinating fact about them. As members of cultures, their behavior is completely altered. Everything they do, every move they make, is done according to the rules and traditions and their role models of their cultures, their diets, mating, birth, communication, and so much that goes on when we have no idea what's going on, are guided by the teachings and examples of family members. The point here is that Toki's extraordinary cool temperament and engaging personality are inherently bound up with her identity as a Southern resident orca. It's what she learned before her capture, and it doesn't go away, even after over 50 years of isolation. The Toki we see today is the same whale that learned how to be an orca and deal with life from her family, especially her mother. It's not just indelibly imprinted on her memory, it's who she actually is. This classic illustration by Uko Gorder of ACS in Seattle describes the known orca ecotypes worldwide, neatly confirming Rendell and Whitehead's description of orca cultural faculties. Some ecotypes include more than one community. For instance, there are at least 5 salmon-eating orca communities from the Salish Sea to Kamchatka, each with its own language and traditions, no crossover between them. They're all lumped together to represent the resident ecotype. And this great whale watcher cover, 2011, acknowledges a basic fact about orcas. Being the apex predator of the world's oceans is also not just an interesting fact about orcas, it has profound implications for their behavior. It means they have lost the need for an instantaneous instinctive reflex, sudden danger. There's no fight or flight or fright, no deer in the headlights response. They just don't experience sudden danger. At least they didn't until modern industrial humans invaded their habitat. No other animal in the sea would try to stalk or attack an orca. They're too big, too fast, and too capable of thrashing or ripping apart anything that may try. And they're famous for their teamwork and cooperation. They usually have each other's backs, and that's been true for maybe 8 or 10 million years. So orcas have had nothing to fear for a very long time, except other orcas, either other family members or other clans or communities. As self-aware animals capable of self-determination, they seem to have developed cultural traditions that minimize hostile interactions. What we see today, so far anyway, in every orca community worldwide are matrilineal family groups centered around the elder grandmothers, with no apparent jousting or competing for dominance by males or females, living in cohesive cultural communities with no in or out migration, and usually only 200 or 300 in each population. And we see virtually no hostility or aggression, either within or between communities, thus no cause for fear. So all of this circles right back to Toki. It means Toki also has no fear. Orca females are usually reproductive from their early teens to around age 40 on average, after which they may live another 3 to 5 decades or more. This long post-reproductive lifespan corresponds with the essential role post-reproductive females play to guide their families, share food with them. Older females also continue to travel up to 100 miles a day with their families until their last few days. So at about 56 years old, Toki is post-reproductive, but her age does not indicate declining health. This is where Toki is from, officially named the Salish Sea in 2009. This beautiful map shows the river systems that once produced bountiful runs of big fat Chinook salmon everywhere at all times of the year. It also shows the mouth of the Columbia River down in the lower left in the ellipse there. And of course, in the Columbia River, even more huge salmon runs. Of course, all year long, fixated on their natal spawning beds throughout the Columbia and Snake River basins into British Columbia and Montana. Not a bad place to live, they must have thought. And one thing I learned from doing photo ID is if there's not a photo, it didn't happen. This photo proves the Salish Sea does exist. This is where Toki was born and raised. She just saw it from a different level. The ancestors of today's southern residents no doubt met up and became very familiar with tribal families who traveled everywhere by canoe since time immemorial. They would have come to know each other personally as they would have encountered one another repeatedly year after year. Humans and orcas were born and grew up in each other's presence over countless generations, building deep traditions of mutual acceptance and kindness for tribal members and for Toki's clan. So if Toki could put photos on a shelf in her tank, this is what they might look like. I think we can assume that she holds memories of traveling, playing, resting, or foraging with her mom and her matroline and her pod and the whole clan that might look something like these. And I'm just going to go through some portraits. These are mostly L-pod whales. So now down to Toki. Who is Toki? Well, she's definitely a survivor against all odds and predictions. She has persevered almost unharmed after almost 52 years in that tiny tank. Orcas are born after 17 or 18 months gestation, and for about half that time, their hearing is developed well enough that they can hear the calls made by their families through the water and the womb. They are able to swim almost immediately after birth and are communicating with their family and starting to catch fish between 1 and 2 years old. You may remember A73 Springer, who was on her own at less than 2 years old, and L95 Luna, who was just a few months older, and both were able to feed themselves in unfamiliar waters with no help from anyone. Toki was captured at about age 4, so she was no doubt a fully fledged member of her family, communicating in her family's dialect and foraging and sharing fish right alongside them. With her impressive brain power, there's no reason to think she's forgotten what she learned or she was taken away. And she's courageous, all right. I mean, think of it, the trauma of the capture, the bombs that went off, the hurting, the separation, the loneliness from her mother and her family, the boredom of captivity, day in, day out, day night, all the time that she is stuck in that tank. It's just hard to imagine how she can keep herself sane, but she has. And Hugo's death in 1980 from apparent suicide. He banged his head against the wall over and over until he died. And the hurricanes, they must be horrendous. There's been a lot of damage at this aquarium. Many animals have been killed. She hasn't taken a direct hit yet, but it could happen anytime. But they must be scary. Everybody else leaves. And new trainers. You just get acquainted with one. You get to where you can trust and have confidence in a trainer, and then they leave. I don't know how many trainers she's had. Dolphins that are hostile. They have been. Pacific white-sided dolphins and orcas just don't get along. Some orcas eat dolphins. Maybe that's why. But they nip at her, they scratch her, and they bite her, and she does slap them back and apparently killed one. And rude people, who knows? I mean, all those shows, there are a lot of hecklers out there. And she's gentle. There's no record of her harming any trainer or herself. And she's affectionate. This is Mayor Kava. And I wonder, what sort of magic was Toki weaving here? Trainers have said when she looks into your eyes, it's like she's looking into your soul. Mayor Kava hasn't said anything publicly, but the way Toki's looking at her with her enhanced empathy, it's not hard to see something intense and beautiful is going on here. Maybe some kind of Orcan mind melt. And here on the left is Toki playing sprinkler with Rachel Anderson. And on the right, I'm just going to play a very short video here. And I'll set it up. 4 aquarium employees were in blue shirts and chatting by the rail, ignoring her. So Toki, the trickster, wrenched them and a few innocent bystanders. Then she checks out her good work and moves on looking satisfied. So let's just see him run. Crowd loved it. They pretended to like it. And she checks it out. Yeah, that worked. Got him. And then she goes on. Okay, well, yeah, there we go. And she seeks companionship. She's not withdrawn. She doesn't sink to the bottom and remain motionless. It's not for long. She reaches out to engage with people. Here she is coming to Rachel, telling her how much she loves her. Southern resident orcas stay with their mothers their entire lives. So you can imagine they're able to form deep relationships that flow from their family traditions and their profound capacity for empathy. And she's energetic. For 50 years, she did 5 breaches per show, 2 or 3 shows per day. She's maintained her cardiovascular vigor over the years. And she works out. Top of her show routines with no trainers, totally of her own volition. This is one time, but not the only time. I've heard of it many other times, but this is one good video of her doing laps. Maybe she enjoys the endorphin rush. She slowly builds up her speed until she streaks around the pool. Any runner or athlete knows that regular workouts help maintain good health. And maybe she just likes exercising to the tune of, "Hey, soul sister." Standing start. Just warming up. Goes. And that's how she finishes her laps. So, in conclusion, let me make it clear that by all the evidence, Tokitae can be safely and successfully returned to her home, and she'll love it. She's energetic, playful, creative. Her mental and physical health are good. She still has all her teeth. She knows how she was raised. She could still have 20 or 40 more years. And she responds well to trust and affection. Transport is routine, not risky. Fear of failure is what is blocking her return, and there's no reason to fear that anything would go wrong. So I hope I haven't kept anybody up too late, and I'm sorry again for the technological glitch, but shall we go to Q&A? Are any? Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Howard. Oh my gosh, that was I just hope you can somehow make this presentation, to far and wide, and to the Dolphin Project leadership, and to that Dade County mayor.
Yes,
I mean,
I hope so too. Yeah, I hope to be part of the conversation. That's sort of a lot of the reason that I wanted to say this.
yes. I mean, you just really brought out this amazing creature, sentient being, as a personality, as a person in her own right. Maybe person isn't the right word, but
Yeah,
anyway, there's, I don't know, I think others may feel the way I am, where I'm just kind of gobsmacked by this amazing new knowledge of this individual, of this species. Some of the things you brought out were just, just pretty amazing. So I think, let's see, which is why I think we don't really have any questions right now. But
well, okay, if your jaws are still on the floor, you can't ask a question.
Exactly. I don't know, Bob, any comments? And I took notes.
We only had one during the chat session. We only had one question, and that was whether Corky is older than Tokitae.
Maybe about the same age, because she was captured earlier, but at a younger age. So they're pretty much the same age, I think. We don't know exactly for either one, but I think they're about the same. But she's been in captivity about a year and a half longer than Toki. Again, a survivor, an amazing, miraculous, strong individual to stay alive all these years and doing well by all indications.
Well, one of the things that I want to raise as well is that if you need help from the public and from individuals, as you can see, there's high interest in this issue, and we at ACS, of course, will pass along and work with you on anything that you might have if you need public impressions from people as well. So keep in mind that you have a very large audience that you can mobilize, and we'll be more than willing to hold it. So, but the
Great, I
question,
appreciate it.
what is your timeline here? What's the latest stage? Like, have the vets done their exam and
Well, we're all on pins and needles. It was announced on March 23rd that there would be an exam, but there has been not one word from any of the responsible people, not from the Dolphin Company or the county or the Friends of Lolita. Nobody will say anything. And I'm very curious. I can understand how there can be a lot of delays just because there's a lot of different opinions, but a medical examination is objective. It's just facts. It's just having the specialist there and getting the numbers. So I don't understand the delay to do that, except that that is step one, which means there's going to be a step two. And step two is where there can be some real disagreements, because a lot of people really think that she is just too old and too weak and would never make it, and it's too risky, and so they don't want to try. So that's what I'm trying to bring out, is that she's none of those things. She's fully capable.
I love your,
how about a process for the release? Howard, for example, when they have if they get releases, are there going to have to be built a sanctuary somewhere? How will that happen?
Well, the steps are all laid out. I mean, I did that 10 years ago, and the whale sanctuary project people have updated all that and done it again. But it's basically, she swims into a stretcher, and then she's lifted and put into a container that is half full of water. That container is rolled onto a cargo plane. The plane flies across the country to near the Salish Sea, the Bellingham Airport. And then that container is put on a flatbed truck, driven down to the waterfront and right onto a barge that has a crane. And that barge is towed out to where there will be a sea pen, which does not have to be a concrete structure. It only needs to be a well built, but just a net that is encloses a cove or a place. And there is at least one good place that is available in the San Juan Islands. And then she could just be lifted in her stretcher and lowered into the water, just like Keiko was into Iceland. And he loved it within seconds of being free of that stretcher, even though he had been in a stretcher for, I think it was 19 hours from Newport, Oregon. He loved it. He kicked up his flukes and swam around and explored every nook and cranny and lost all interest in those humans. He just wanted to look around his habitat that he hadn't seen for, in his case, about 20 years. So I think that's how she'll respond too.
Howard.
I see from the chat room as well that we have that there's a Facebook Orca Network Lolita Tokitae group page.
Yes, please join.
And in addition, what else can individuals do, Howard?
Well,
and thank you, Henry Roller, for the link and your question.
I would say let your feelings be known to mainly, I think, the county commission and Mayor Cava. They seem very tuned in, very much want to help. I think they have some feelings for Toki too. Once you meet her, I think that happens. And they have been very active in doing whatever is the best thing. And if you let them know that we want her to come home, and that by all indications, all the science and her entire history, there's no reason to think that there would be any danger, any real risk. So she can do this, because we have to sort of turn that opinion, that sort of bias around. And that's the hard part. So if they can just sort of show some confidence in her. I think people in sort of the industry and the professional people tend to underestimate her. They think she's just a trained whale and that's about all there is to know about her. But oh boy, there's a whole lot more to know about her. She just doesn't show it. But if you look into her history, she has a lot of strengths, a lot of capabilities that you just don't see, when she's doing tricks.
Who will have the final say on these releases? Is it the county commissioners? Is it USDA?
Well, in fact, it's first the owner has to want to do it. And I think they do. I think they're willing. They're not making any money. They're losing a lot of money on her. And they're going to start to get embarrassed by, keeping her there. But then it's got to pass through NOAA because she is a member of an endangered population. She's listed under the ESA. So that puts another level of scrutiny by NOAA. So they will have to approve of a plan. And they're probably more skeptical than anybody. So that's going to be the tough hurdle, I think, is to get the NOAA permitting office to say, okay, stamp of approval, this will work. They've got to understand that it will work. And then I don't think they want to take a risk. They don't want to say, okay, if they really believe it'll be a disaster. So they've got to believe that she'll do just fine. And of course,
I know the NOAA process, and before that, when they do have any proposed permit, it is public and they ask for comments. There's a comment in the Federal Register. That is where I think we're going to have to marshal the forces here and bring the public involved and really put the pressure on NOAA to grant that permit. And
that's very true. Yeah, that's a very good point. I hadn't really thought about that. That is where the public can, and by institution, should get involved. There's a process for that. Let's use it.
I think we can take this on, Bob, and put together a list of the action of who, where to write. Annette, somebody asked about, should we be also sending, the communication letters, calls to the county commissioners? But it sounds like that it's got to be a multi-pronged approach in terms of where the final approvals come from. So maybe we can get together, Bob, and work with Howard and put out something of all the action.
Yeah, I can get you a list of just a few names, just 3 or 4 names that would be the primary decision makers in this. And
like I said, it's a little too early to try to put pressure on NOAA because they don't have anything before them officially yet.
Correct.
My guess, USDA is going to have to certify like they do with any rehab like that. And then like you say, you've got the politics of the dolphin company. And then when it goes for the NOAA permit process, that's when I think the public is really going to have to become engaged.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, letters to NOAA won't do anything right now, but generally letters to the county commission and to the company, can help to sort of show that the public is very aware and very supportive of her returning to her home, and that can sway things. So all that sort of adds up to the overall public pressure, but really it's public opinion that it can work, that it can be done.
Well, we could say that those of us in ACS, both our local chapter and nationally, will certainly become involved in this issue and give you support without a doubt.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I appreciate this chance to tell her story the best I could. And sorry for my laptop.
That you did. There are a couple other questions. If we're successful with the release, where would she be released?
He covered that. He went through the process.
Okay, good. Sorry.
All of that.
And including the tank built for Keiko?
Yeah, that was covered by the process he put through, how they were going to do it, right?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, she would go back to the San Juan Islands, to
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yep. So I think we've covered all the questions,
Okay,
and
Well,
I'm following the chat as well, right?
sorry to keep you up late.
oh, that's okay. We still have a few more minutes for those who are interested. And I know I wanted to bring out a little bit, Howard, your own personal story and involvement, and the fact that you had really spent a lot of time observing Toki, and and the backlash of that, where you became persona non grata at this
right.
marine aquarium. And I don't know, I think it would be interesting just to hear a little bit, whatever you might want to share about your personal experience on that.
Well, I've always said that she should come home. I mean, that's how we started in 1995. It was actually started by Ken Balcom, the governor of Washington, and the Secretary of State launched the campaign. And then I picked it up because they had jobs, and I started a nonprofit organization to make it happen. But I've always said she should come home. And so I've been labeled by the industry basically as an activist, so a persona non grata. But I've always wanted and tried to say that it's because she is a Southern resident, because I knew Southern residents before I knew her, and from the studies, from the demographic studies, and I understood their family dynamics and well, so much about them. It says so much, their capabilities. And so I knew that's really who she was. And that's what I've been trying to tell people all this time. So, I'm sort of an activist / educator, to try to show the natural history behind it, behind the whole idea that she should come home. It's not only, a animal welfare effort, but it's also to try to tell her story, because her story is her family's story. They're unbreakable. So that's what I've been trying to do all this time. But from the park's point of view and the industry, they have just sort of written me off as an activist. But it's gained traction over all these years tremendously. There's a huge following of people who are saying she's got to come home. And that's a very powerful force right now. They don't want to admit it necessarily, but there's a lot of public opinion out there that is weighing very heavily on the decision makers to do the right thing, or their own reputations could be at stake. And so that, I think, has a big effect. Public opinion really matters. And that's, what we've been trying to do is make it have an effect.
There was also a comment, and for her family and for those resident orcas, regarding the fact that there are a lot of dams. There's a real problem with their food source, their primary food source.
Well, that's very true. And if I'd had a little more time, if I hadn't had the technological breakdown, I had a few more slides to build the case for removal of 4 dams on the Snake River, because those are blocking a huge amount of salmon. Of course, they're not the only problem. It's not a panacea, but that would be the biggest benefit for the least time and effort and expense to replenish their salmon supplies in their habitat. It would do them a world of good if those salmon could rebuild their numbers, and those dams have to come down for that to happen. It's becoming very, very well known. And in fact, our Senator Murray and Governor Inslee have promised for 6 months that they're going to come out with a report, a statement in June, coming right up in a few weeks, on their position on removal of the Snake River dams. And they've been sort of afraid to go there all this time because there is such a backlash machine, you know, ready to pounce on anybody that says that. But again, public opinion has weighed in big time, and these orcas are that precious, and that is the biggest single problem. There are many other little problems. There's harvest, there's overall restoration of habitat, but removal of those dams would be a huge benefit to the orcas and so much else.
Well, let me jump in here. I should say there is litigation on that right now. Earth Justice filed a lawsuit and to remove those 4 dams, and they've suspended it until July of 2022, pending that the Biden administration and the report that's supposed to come out. But they've said if it doesn't come out the way they want to, the litigation will continue. And so
Okay,
there's current litigation on the number of bases to do that, to have those dams removed.
well, that should be another little prod to get it right and do it right. And I think the Biden administration is probably willing to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, so the signs are good.
Right.
Boy, it'd be great if in the next 6 months we can have the announcement that Toki is coming home and the dams are coming down, you know, after all this time. Those are both are very possible in the near future. Yeah,
Well, maybe that's a good note to end on.
okay, right. Yep,
And-
it's hopeful and realistic.
And I'd like to say to be continued too, because Howard, we'd love to have you back, because we know that this story will continue to develop. And like we said, we will definitely be doing some follow-up to our community on this, on your talk.
So appreciate it, and let's keep in touch, and I'll work with you on the right places for people to write to.
Yeah.
And, we'll go from there. All right.
Great.
Thank
Hey,
you, Susan.
all.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Ending the
right.
recording now.